Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony McClain, and this is Bout That Time, the podcast where we discuss bridging the gap between thinking positively and doing positively. I am so excited to introduce to you a really, really important friend of mine. She goes by the name of Mellody Hobson. Let me get the list out. I don't want to miss all the things that she's accomplished. But she's the president of Ariel Investments, vice chair of the board of Starbucks, chairman of After School Matters, first African-American woman to chair the Economic Club of Chicago's board of directors. In 2015, was named to Time Magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Lastly, and most importantly, she's a very, very mediocre rummy cube player.
That is so not true.
You know we keep track though.
Why do you want to lie?
Because starting off, I mean,
Why do you wanna
it's
lie?
facts.
Why
I
do
think
you
the
wanna
last time we
lie?
played, I won.
First and last time. First time you ever won. Let's tell the truth here.
You're right. You are a savage. I appreciate it though. I'm really happy you brought that game into my life. It's really it's serious.
It's good for your brain.
It is.
It's hard.
It is. And you talk a lot of trash with the numbers because you're really good at them. So you try to play games. I got you. I'm getting better. But,
You're coming along.
I am. But speaking of financial literacy, or trying to pivot into the interview now, it wouldn't surprise people that financial literacy is something that's really, really important to you, and you've become an authority in that space. I would love for you to illustrate why financial literacy matters to you and why it should matter to everybody else.
Well, it matters to me because of how I grew up, and I tell people that based upon the way I grew up, I was desperate to understand money.
Mm-hmm.
That we grew up, I was the youngest of 6 kids. My mom was a single mom, and like many, so my story is not
I hear you.
unique.
I'm right there with you.
Not unique. It's not comparative shopping. It's not worse than anyone's.
Yes.
But like many people, we had a lot of ups and downs, and a
Yes.
lot of downs, more downs than ups.
Mhm.
And we had our lights turned off and our water disconnected, and we got evicted all the time, and cars repossessed, all of that. And I tell people it was that unstable upbringing that made me feel desperate to understand money. Now, I want to be very clear. My mom did a lot she worked super hard.
Yes.
She worked so hard to make ends meet. But it just didn't always happen for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so this financial literacy evangelism that I have is really born out of that existence.
Mm-hmm.
And this life that I lead today, where I'm in the investment world and I know the benefits, not only mentally, not only physically, not only spiritually, of not feeling like things are going to fall apart
All the time. Yes.
and so that is what has led me to be out in the world talking about this, because I know how much better we can all be when we're not worried about money.
Speaking to communities of color specifically, in conjunction with financial literacy, for one, how do we ameliorate that, or how do we improve upon that?
So first of all, I would tell you that, this is not a blame game.
Yes.
So when it comes to our community and communities of color, as well as the white community,
Yes.
we are not as literate financially as a society as we should be.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly people of color are even farther behind our white counterparts.
Yes.
And I tell people that before we all start, self-loathing, self-hating, self-flagellating,
Yes.
understand the circumstance.
Yes.
Most people do not grow up in homes where the stock market is discussed, people of color,
Yes.
because it's just not been a part of our tradition. And then on top of that, we don't learn about investing in school in America.
No.
And so the example that I've given many times is literally you could take auto or wood shop in a high school in America today
Mm-hmm.
and not a class on investing, which is much more important to your
Yes.
long-term life and that of your heirs, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it always leads me to ask audiences the same question. Who whittles, right? Who's cleaning their own carburetor? And yet those are the classes you
That
could
we
take
learn.
as an elective in high school as opposed to investing.
Mm-hmm.
So that, first and foremost, if you
Yes.
don't grow up in a home where the stock market is discussed
Yes.
and you don't learn about it in school,
Where do
you're
you go?
behind the 8 ball. So then let's say you go out and you get a job, you got to pick the mutual funds for your 401k plan,
Mm-hmm.
or you decide you're going to start investing and putting some money away, but no one has taught you.
Mm-hmm.
Who goes head first into something like that they don't understand
That seems
with their
overwhelming.
hard-earned money?
True.
That doesn't seem prudent either.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done a lot of research on what keeps African Americans from investing to the same degree as our white counterpart. And we actually went out and surveyed African American households that had $50,000 in household income or more. We started that research years and years ago. And interestingly, we found 5 reasons our community is underinvested versus our white counterparts. So first of all, it's knowledge. 2/3 of us say we don't invest because we don't know enough. Makes sense because we don't learn about it in school. Then there's misinformation. We just have bad facts, like you have to be rich to invest, or that you won't have access to your money, when in fact there are now more and more mutual funds and investment firms that allow you to start with zero minimum. Then we have this whole issue of knowledge, misinformation. Then we have trust issues. We have a lot, like who's going to steal our money?
Yes. Because that's go ahead.
Where is Wall Street?
Yes.
I don't even know what that is. So we have these trust issues. We think we're going to be
taken advantage of.
Exactly.
Yes.
Then we have an exposure. So we don't grow up in a home where the stock market is discussed. We don't know people who have these kind of assets. I mean, take it a step further. No one in my family really, until very, very recently, ever retired. I mean, we typically work until we die, right?
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but you're 100% right. Yeah.
Like, who has a boat and lives
Nobody.
on the beach? And then last but not least, we tend to be more conservative. So even if we decide, okay, we're going to go and do it, we don't want to lose anything. So the stock market to us seems like gambling.
Yeah.
And I said, there's no game here. You know, investing are informed decisions. This is not throwing a dart against the wall and hoping it works out.
Yes. So that's interesting that you brought it up, because I think the cultural wealth part is something that's really, really important to talk about, just because we don't do enough of that. And in this present day, especially with millennials, this hashtag and this mindset and this belief of Black excellence is really, really popular. And I totally stand behind it. It made me feel empowered to see groups of Black people celebrating each other, just because it's not too often that we see that. And as more and more Black people are getting rich, I think they're starting to realize the importance of wealth from a standpoint of, and in my mindset, I feel like being rich will buy you a jet, but wealth might actually equate to justice. Like for example, when it comes to professional athletes, like the owners make way more than the players. When it comes to artists, you're afraid of 360 deals. I think about, like, especially the hip hop artists that came in the game first. They are broke, and they shouldn't be, because they created like they were the pillars of something really, really powerful. And I was just wondering if you had any idea or proposals in which we can break down that negative stigma, or is it essentially just practice?
So first, you may be surprised that I don't equate wealth and money.
Okay.
So let's start with that.
Teach.
Wealth, you can be wealthy in lots of ways and not have actual, coin.
Yes.
So you can be wealthy in talent. You can be wealthy in spirit. You can be wealthy. There are a lot of ways that wealth comes. And I remember once I heard Magic Johnson speak, and he said something that I thought was really profound, where he said that he grew up poor, but his mom said to him once, just because you grew up poor doesn't mean you have to have poor dreams. Doesn't mean you have to have poor ideas. And that I just sort of turned that on its head, that like wealth can come in lots of ways.
Yes.
So he's wealthy in basketball talent, right? Or was. But there are a lot of other examples of that. Some people, it's their communication skills. Other people, it's their rhymes. You can go down lots of paths of what wealth is. I think that's a very, very, very important mindset, because my mom, as an example, didn't allow me to feel poor. No, that wasn't about faking it. It wasn't about, although maybe there was a little bit of that there, but it was a mindset. And so I think you can have a wealthy mindset. And wealth, if you have that mindset, then you're thinking through how to grow whatever you have. Start with some small ambition. And I know this sounds crazy, that you're going to save 50 cents a day. Then you're going to, in 3 months, save $1 a day. That's already $30 a month. Then in 3 months, you're going to save $2 a day, which is $60 a month that you're putting away. I mean, like, literally think
Baby
that
steps.
simply.
Yeah.
So going from $15 to $60 in 9 months, when you start compounding that money and putting it away to save it over time, it turns out to be real money. And so wealth is an idea, as opposed to something that is concrete in many, many ways. And you said, is wealth justice? It can be, but not always.
True.
And so I think we should be, it doesn't solve everything.
It doesn't.
But, and interestingly, yes, we have more Black people making more money than 50 years ago or 100 years ago. There's no question about that. But are more Black people building wealth? And
that's the question that I want to get to. Yes.
That is where I'm trying to push, because stuff is not wealth. And I'm talking about not only wealth that will last you through a lifetime, money that will last you through a lifetime, but I'm also talking about the intergenerational passing on of assets so that we create a paradigm shift in our community.
Yes.
And so you might, the last part I would say about this is there's a difference between wealth and what you get paid. So, that's why you want to be an owner rather than getting earned income from a paycheck. You always, which is why equity, stocks are equity or ownership in a business. You always want to own if you can.
Yes.
So if you told me the difference between $100 million basketball contract
versus
or being an owner, I'm going to take the owner every single time.
To me, I think that's the major conversation from a standpoint of we get money and all of a sudden we get comfortable, we get complacent, but we don't necessarily realize that there's a next step. And or we're not sure how to go about really facilitating wealth, just because once again we don't have people whom of which one we trust. I think we need to dismantle the trust thing, and then two, it's just foreign territory to us.
I always say to people, it's like you don't go and find a doctor for your child by looking in the yellow pages or just going on Google. Let me just say that you ask for.
I like that reference.
You ask for references.
Yes.
I got to bring it up today.
I know.
You ask for references. You would ask all the kids, parents in the kindergarten class or whatever it is. You just aren't going to go on Google and say pediatrician when it's your child's health. So I'm saying, why wouldn't you do the same thing when it comes to money? If you should have that trust issue, but you can verify it with references, asking people where they've had success, who's done a good job for them, just like you would do with a doctor. Let's take the doctor metaphor further. So you go to meet with a doctor, and let's just say your child had an accident. You go to see the doctor, and they say, he broke his tibia in 4 places. Now, you would say to them, what does that mean? The average person, the doctor would say he broke his leg.
Yes.
So I don't understand why when some people go to investment people to help them, they allow this lingo to stay out there that they don't understand without saying, what does that mean? No one should be doing anything with your money that you don't understand. But the onus is on you to ask the question and be educated. But typically what happens is our apprehension is based upon not wanting to look stupid.
Yeah.
And so if we don't know about something, we don't want to just ask, what does that mean? And get that further defined. But could be the difference between life or death. Yeah. And I mean that figuratively and literally in terms of having a better life in your old age, being able to afford your health care, all of those things.
Medications.
So asking these questions are super important. When I was very young and I started working, I used to ask if I was going to buy something. I used to literally ask myself a simple question as a way of deciding how important it was to me. How many days would I have to work to get it? I'd broke my salary down into days.
Wow.
And then if I was going to buy something, I'd say, that's 7 days.
That was your...
And then you'd say, in certain things like a sofa, that's a lot of days, and you say to yourself, is that worth it to you? It's just finding tricks to help you understand the math.
And manage it.
Yeah, and stay on track, because the other way people think about it is, I know a lot of people would say, what's the minimum payment?
True.
The minimum payment is a lot of compounded interest working against you. True. And a lot of years.
And folks don't talk about
Right. And when you start to do the minimum payment out, it's 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. So
when it comes to these college loans, sometimes they just don't, it doesn't end.
But that's an investment I would make any day of the week. That investment in education, that's wealth. That is wealth. That is something that cannot be taken away from you.
True. In reference to education, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about how, and I don't think it's any surprise, across the racial spectrum, women are earning far more degrees, about 60% on average in comparison to men. And I would love to hear your perspective on women's role in wealth development. Just because I feel like it's something that's not often broached, but obviously more than prepared, more than ready, and more than capable. But I would love to hear your viewpoint on that.
So first and foremost, times are changing. So in terms of wealth being passed on, a woman is much more likely to inherit money than a man. Yes. And it tends to be a white woman. We don't have a lot of inheritances in the Black and brown communities, but white women are much more likely to inherit money than a white man. Why? A father with 2 kids, a white man with 2 kids, will think, I want to take care of my daughter. They go back to traditional roles and they think their son will work or what have you. So again, I know it sounds crazy, but we still see some of that occur in our society. The other thing we're seeing, obviously, baby boomers pass on wealth. That's a big birth cohort that is moving their money on to their children and grandchildren. So women are in the position right now of inheriting a lot of money in the next decade or so. And we're already seeing that happen. The interesting thing also, which I think is really great, is all the data shows we're better investors.
I'm not going to sit here and refute that. And I'm also not going to say that I'm surprised.
So what I mean by that is we tend to be more patient investors. We tend to be more less trigger happy. So an event in the world doesn't lead us to panic and change. And we're just much more long-term in our thinking than men who might think that they can time the market, which is a losing strategy, or moving in and out around volatility in the market. A woman, not that we don't ever do it, we're less likely to do it than our male counterparts.
Less impulsive.
So we end up with better financial results. Now, when you overlay race, it is fascinating because we looked at this a few years ago as well. So we looked at investing by race, and what we found out was this tagline that I used, that Black women were the pants in the family. So even if you have a married couple, African American, the woman has a big say in the money. Many times in our community, the woman might control the bank account in terms of paying all the bills, etc. So being in a very different position. And I used to tell financial advisors, and still do, if you meet with a Black couple, don't think about discounting the Black woman. I think it's a bad idea no matter what.
Of course.
So, please know, I would never advocate it ever, ever, ever. But if you're not sitting there treating the Black woman as the equal, making eye contact with her, etc., you're not getting the account.
You're not going to get the business.
You're not getting the account. We make our greatest financial decisions, our biggest financial decisions in times of great emotional stress, usually death or divorce. That is typically when we have to make our biggest financial decisions. You do not want to make those decisions without all the information under stress. You will make very, very bad decisions. So that's why I always tell women, know where the accounts are, know your insurance policies. Where is the lockbox that you use? The safety deposit box. All of these things are, do you have powers of attorney? Do you have medical powers of attorney? All of that, getting that right. So, because the worst thing that happen is your spouse or partner is in the intensive care unit and checks are bouncing because you don't even know where accounts are. And talk about stress. That is really, really stressful. Clearly, the same is true with divorces. And I don't say that to try to preempt. You're not trying to put anyone on notice.
True.
It's just a smart way to set things up.
Yes.
And setting them up on the front end. How is this going to work? Is it a joint account, separate? Do you pay this? I pay that? How is this all going to work? Understanding what the person brings into the relationship, debt, credit score, all of that, because it can be conflated with you to the extent these things get intermingled.
There were some statistics I want to use that kind of speak to that, but I recently saw this Wall Street Journal article, and they're talking about the workplace post Me Too, and it mentioned how men and women entered the workforce at the same rate, but women are immediately met with resistance in reference to their trajectory. By senior management level, men outnumber women 2-1, and in the C-suite, only 22% are women. For women of color, it's just 4% of the highest level jobs. What do you believe is the largest contributor to these statistics?
I think there are a lot of factors, and I mean there are so many, and I don't want to say there's one silver bullet, of course, there's institutionalized stereotyping, that gender bias that is sometimes subtle and subconscious and sometimes very overt,
Yes.
that affects the trajectory and careers of women. So I believe that. I think the other thing is that I think that there are times when the compensation differences have created a discouraging scenario for the woman, and so she opts out of that corporate role and says, and we see this a lot with minorities and women, where they say, well, I want to be my own boss and go and be an entrepreneur, as opposed to staying in this setting where I don't feel fully valued.
So expand on that. So
we will
are you
start-
saying that men get paid more in these boardrooms than women do?
No, not in boardrooms, but in the dollar for
C-level
dollar,
positions?
all positions. So the dollar for dollar says that women make, I think it's 86 cents for every dollar, or 88 cents for every dollar that a man makes. Some say that number is actually lower because the methodology assumes only those people who consistently worked over a course of a year, and it doesn't even consider women who drop out maybe to have a child and come back, and how they come back. They might not have gotten that raise while they were gone, those sort of things. So my point being that in terms of pay equity, we don't have that yet in corporate America. All the data shows it. I'm not talking about board seats, because if you're a board member, you make the same as another board member. There's no discrimination there.
Yes.
But in terms of pay equity, there are those differences that might lead very, very capable women. Same is true of people of color to say, I'm going to go and do something for myself, or I'm going to opt out. I'm not going to stay in this corporate hierarchy. So that can affect those numbers as they opt out. You have to have trajectories for these individuals, mentors for them, people they can look up and see. And if you don't have a mentor, you have to just at least know it's possible.
Yes.
I always say you can't be what you can't see. Now, we've had that's not really true, because we've had a lot of people be things that never happened before. But I do think that it helps to see that woman in the C-suite, or to see, that person who had that trajectory. I think it's one of the things that's helped Ariel in terms of my own career. I started as an intern. I've had one job my entire career. I went to Princeton, and then after graduating from Princeton, I went to Ariel, and I've worked there for 28 years, which is just shocking. And I think
also
people,
amazing, though.
But when they see that I was an intern that became president, I think that tells them I could be that too.
How did you go about advocating for yourself during all of that? Just because that's a lot of work, and a lot of people just aren't good at self-advocacy. It makes them feel uncomfortable. What was your mindset going from the bottom to the top? Because that's really important.
I had a very, very, very simple mindset. So first, I had this idea, which my mother gave me. She was like, make yourself indispensable. She's like, just literally be the person that someone cannot live without. And like, that you will do whatever job no one else wants to do. Literally, volunteer for the worst. The worst. And I remember we'd have to do things like write a recommendation for someone, and I just volunteered, do the research, do the work. But that gets you in that indispensable category. When you get to be indispensable, you are very, very valuable. That's not about advocacy. That's just about someone needing you. And I tell people, just think about what you'd want. Like, just make it that simple. Like, think of all the things you'd want someone to volunteer for in your life. And I was like, I just channeled that for years. I mean, years. That's number one, making myself indispensable and being available. The second piece of it that I thought was really, really important is I didn't advocate for myself. My work did.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I mean, go ahead.
I was like, if I do excellent work, it speaks for itself. I would never put anything in front of John that it would be a perfect sentence. It wouldn't be like, I'm going to edit this after you approve the content. It would be perfectly laid out. Now, he might change something, etc., but my mind would be, I want perfection in front of him. I would have someone else read and proof. And if I didn't have someone who could read or proof for me, I read backwards.
What do you mean you read backwards?
You read your document backwards to find mistakes. That's how you see two words that are exactly the same, all sorts of spelling. Read backwards. It's very tedious, but if there's no one there to help you, that's what you do.
I mean, that's a pro tip I've never even heard of.
Yeah.
So wow.
Read backwards. So that was always my mindset. It was like, I'm not going to have to go and toot my own horn. It's just going to be so obvious. And I always felt that if I could do the work, if I could take the time to really, really study and learn, my confidence was always very, very strong. So my confidence always came from being prepared. That's where I got my confidence. And if I could walk in prepared, and I tell people this, when I'm on television and I'm doing, talking about the stock market and investing, like if something totally hits me off guard, like usually I've tried to prepare for every scenario of what could come up in a conversation, because you don't know. You're in a back and forth conversation with someone like this. But let's say I need stats, or it's around a specific company, et cetera, and I've tried to read as thoughtfully and broadly as I can. If I'm really, really unsure, I hear a quiver in my own voice. That's when I know. But it's imperceptible to another person. And I'll say to myself, calm your brain, focus, focus, focus. I hear it.
Yes.
And I'll know. I don't want to
too.
hear that quiver. And so my way of not having that quiver for me is to have thought through all the permutations of what could come up. And so if I have that preparation, I'm very, very confident. Not a swagger, not arrogant, confident. Like, I got it. I will be fine.
I think that's really, really powerful, just because in reference to progress and in reference to self-advocacy, in reference to making yourself better, that confidence is a major component of it. And the fact that you found a way to practice it or exercise it through preparation is something that when you're not coming through the way you want to. And everyone knows what that sounds like for them personally. And your ability to be able to immediately correct that, immediately calm and soothe yourself and still kind of remind yourself who you are is something that I think is really, really invaluable. I think sometimes people walk into positions just hoping they get it right, but that's not how you operate, and it's obviously not coincidence.
Also, don't bluff. So in that situation, if I don't know something, I don't know that answer. It's like that is the right answer if you don't know.
Correct.
Like the BS answer is the bad answer.
Yeah.
The other thing people don't realize is I just practice over and over and over again. So I'm just like driving to the studio in San Francisco. It could be 3:30 in the morning that time, because that would be 6:30 New York, and maybe I'm on early in the show, CBS morning show, or in Chicago, wherever it might be, and all I do is go over and over and over the conversation out loud, and I'll have random, like a driver there, and I'll say, did everything I said make sense to you? What didn't you understand that I said? Because I need you to be just a regular person who knows nothing about this topic. Where were you confused?
Yeah.
And then I have people, and they'll say like, well, I absolutely agree with you, or that, or I didn't understand this one thing you said. And I use people as guinea pigs. I do that with my writing. So when I write our client letter every quarter, I'll have assistants in my office read them, because I'll say, I want someone who's like, I don't want the analyst, who knows everything there is to know about the stock. I want the person who is furthest away from it. Yes. Sometimes I'll send it to a friend. I have readers that'll read for me. I'll say, read this. Does this make sense to you? Because I want you to be a bus driver or a CFO and understand what I'm talking about. And it's very hard to simplify that which is complicated. But that's what the genius is. Yeah. That's what Warren Buffett's genius is. And that's true in investing. That's true in everything. I love this line that Buffett has where he says, people think when I'm investing, I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. He says, I'm just looking for haystacks. He owns things like Coca-Cola and American Express. He's like, I buy the obvious, but I understand what it is about that obvious thing that other people are missing and why it should continue to be great. There's nothing worse than the person having that confidence or arrogance who hasn't done the work.
Agreed.
And, it's like I love that line from Bill Bradley, the Hall of Fame basketball player who I adore and love in every way. And, former New York Knick. And there was a book written about him called The Sense of Where You Are when he was a student at Princeton playing on the Princeton basketball team. The book was by John McPhee. And there's a line in the book that says, you can fool the fans, but not the players. And I just think that is like, the players know.
Yeah, that's also a good
quote. You can fool the fans, but not the players. And I'm always think, who's the player listening to me? And I want them to say, like, she's got that.
How did you ignore the societal pressures that are kind of set upon women that you need to be married by X, kids by Y? Like, how did you navigate that space without like getting derailed?
So first of all, I don't believe in settling.
Blue, let's let them know. Straight up,
I
yes.
just don't believe in settling.
Yes.
So if it wasn't right, it wasn't going to happen.
Mhm.
And I don't believe in other people's timelines. And I don't believe in living a life that other people want for me. I want to live the life that I want for myself.
Mhm.
So I'd rather be single and happy than divorced and unhappy.
Facts.
And I just, it was not something that I would not ever even consider or do.
Mhm.
I also thought of my life, this will sound very calculated. It wasn't,
Mhm.
but it was deliberate. That would be the word that I would use. Not calculated, but deliberate. I thought of decades of my life as periods of activity. So, for example, in my 20s, I was like, go all out.
Mhm.
Pedal to the floor, work super hard.
Mhm.
Work so that, you know, I love that line from Jesse Jackson, freedom is never free. That's when I paid for my freedom.
That was your mindset behind it. Yes.
Pay for my freedom, because I'm going to get it later with
Yes.
control of my time, control
Later
of
on.
the agenda. But right now, I'm going to
Grind.
pay for my freedom. And so I knew that was a decade I was just going to go all in.
Mhm.
I wasn't that concerned about who I was going to date or marry during that period. I just have to tell you, it wasn't. I was about, let me establish myself professionally, emotionally, in all the ways that I wanted to establish myself. You can't build a skyscraper on a poor foundation. And so I wanted to one day have a skyscraper, but I
Mhm.
needed the foundation to be very, very strong. And it was just a dues paying period.
How many hours a day would you say you worked during that period?
A lot. I used to like sleep under my desk at Ariel. Oh yeah.
Grind.
John, they would come in and I'd be wearing the same clothes. I would sleep in my office. I'd take a nap under my desk and keep working. And it's a funny story because it ties to fitness.
Mhm.
John came in one day and he was like, I'm really worried about you.
Mhm.
Like, when do you exercise? When do you do these things? And I was always a small person,
Mhm.
And he was like, if you don't go to the gym, you're not getting your bonus. I was like, what are you talking about? He says, you're not getting your bonus. And I said, you can't do that. And he said, bonuses are discretionary. And I was like, okay, got that.
So you gotta do what you gotta do.
So then I was like running marathons. He was like, I just said like maybe 30 minutes at the gym and now it's become this crazy life of yours, because I'm like all in. But it started with me like literally sleeping under my desk and him saying, I don't think you're healthy. And then it turned into, you're not getting your bonus unless you go to the gym.
And then you were like, I'm going to the gym. That is so fascinating. So, wow. Okay, so, wow. So, since we're on the topic, something that I want to share with folks, because I used to train Mellody, and every now and then she still comes to next class. And when I say I don't know anyone that's as avid exercise enthusiast as like, there's literally on vacation working out 3 times a day.
I always say to myself, like, how do I challenge myself in my own mind? Like, I've been doing these VersaClimber classes that
Super
LeBron
hard.
does.
Yeah.
They are so
super hard.
They're only 30 minutes. They're that hard.
Yeah.
And Carmilla and I decided last Sunday to do 45.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it really takes a real, like,
It's a full
mental
body exercise.
But these things are mental.
Yes.
It's physical, yes, but the mental part is the part that I'm thinking through.
Yes.
I've run 4 marathons, and
Yes.
in doing marathon training, it's mental.
Yes.
Your body can do it. Can
It
your
always
mind?
can. It always can.
Can your mind do it?
Yes.
And so that translates very beautifully in my work. Like, can my mind do this? And sometimes it's just finding strength. Like, how do I do this a little bit better?
Yes.
And so I'm always trying to see, is there like a little bit more of an edge that I can get on something in terms of efficiency?
The thing that's really, really fascinating about that and what I really appreciate is, as a fitness professional, that's the part that I really try to get across, is like that mindfulness from a standpoint of like the calories, they come back. So we shouldn't be focusing on that. It's more so about your ability to see these as opportunities and not obstacles. Like your ability to prepare yourself for the rest of your day. I feel like far too often, at least in my line of work, people come and they exercise to distract themselves from their problems instead of getting more grounded, instead of getting more prepared, instead of preparing themselves to actually take to tackle their day. It's much more of a therapeutic, rehabilitative, and I just think a lot less conducive to productivity. And I think the way you discussed it, what it does for you and how you allow it to affect everything else in your life, once, like, as obviously not coincidence, but two, this really speaks volumes. And I just really wish everybody viewed fitness in that way. Like, it's not about being LeBron, it's about preparing yourself to be the best version of yourself.
I also want to live a long life for my child. I want to
Also
have,
true.
I don't want to be old and broken down. I don't want to be in a wheelchair when Everest is 40 years old. God willing, I make it that long. I don't want to be a burden on her, you know, who is so much younger than her other siblings in the family. And so she has a different life ahead of her. And so I think that's responsible in terms of what she needs out of a mother. I think that I have to serve her very, very well because I did have her older. Now, it's interesting. My mom had me when she was 44.
Same age, yeah.
The exact same age.
Yeah.
And so I don't come at this, you know, I know what it was like when my mom was 80 and what that was like when she wasn't, you know, functioning in the same way that she had when I was 10 years old. And what that felt like, and you know how lonely, especially when you're the only child, the youngest child, in the way that I was.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think is important. But the other thing is, I think all too often, as people, all people, we let ourselves off the hook.
Yes.
And I don't think that's, I didn't get
You
here
get
by
complacent,
letting myself
yeah.
off the hook or having an excuse. And you did this to me once. I remember being in class one day and I had a really bad cold. I'll never forget
I love this story too. I love this story. Go ahead, tell them.
And you literally called me out from the podium, and I don't mind being called out from the podium.
You
And
don't.
I
You
really,
don't.
if
You
you,
do own it. You're right.
are not happy with me, tell me.
Yes.
Like, I don't get my nose is
Sensitive.
not a joint.
No,
I'm
no.
like, okay, make me better.
Yes.
If I'm doing something and I'm not living to my potential,
Let me know.
push me and let me know. So anyway, you called me out and you're like, Mellody, you know, you're not showing up very well today. And I remember I said, I have a cold over all this loud music, everything. And you said, but you're here.
True.
And I said, you know, that's literally, that would be an aerial thing.
True.
Like someone slacking at work because they have a cold.
That
I
doesn't
would
slide.
literally give
Yeah.
them the eye roll.
Yeah.
And so you did exactly the right thing in reminding me of the commitment that I had made. And if I was going to make that commitment, you know, do everything possible. It may not have been my best day,
Yeah,
but make it
your
as
best
best
effort.
it could be
Yes,
that
best
day.
effort.
And I really did. I mean, I switched mentally at that moment and owned it.
The story I was talking about though, because that one happened. But my favorite story was the story when I go. And granted, I actually want to set the context. So class starts at 6 a.m. This might have been during a time period with class starting at 5:45. And I go, Mellody, this is your second workout today, huh? And she goes, yeah. And she nods her head. And I go,
Stop acting like it. Stop acting like it.
I said, stop acting like it. And then she looks at me and politely flips me the bird. But it's like the cutest bird ever. It's the cutest bird ever. And everyone laughed. It was so perfect. It was so perfect. But I loved that moment. Loved that moment.
Well, he knows that Carmela just breaks me down before I see
Yes.
him. And so
Yes.
hers are so hard.
At like 3:30, 4 o'clock
The
in the morning.
idea of going and doing another one
It's
sometimes is
hard.
overwhelming. But
100%.
listen, I showed up
Yes.
and I'm supposed to give it what I've got.
Your TED Talk about being colorblind. No, correction. Color brave. There is no color blindness. Resonated with me in a way that I didn't necessarily expect it to, and not because of the topic, but you had said that you had succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. That might be so, but are you surprised by your success?
This is how I would say it with a lot of humility. I'm amazed, but not surprised.
Yes.
I'm amazed.
Yes.
I'm amazed that this could happen in America. I'm amazed that I could go as far as I have gone. I'm amazed that I could feel financially secure.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm surprised. I'm not surprised because I know what kind of work I put into it and that I never thought it would be handed to me. And I was willing to just pay the dues, as I said. I just have always been willing to do that. And I always believed that if you put the work in, you would get back the reward.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not in any set amount of time, but over a lifetime. So things have happened to me that truly have just floored me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. I'm pinching myself. But when I put all of the pieces together, it makes sense.
Yeah. What do you see for yourself in the future? What is it that you're working toward?
People always ask that question, and I just have very simple answers. I've always wanted to, what I see for myself is not about some wholesale change.
Mm-hmm.
What I see for myself is about improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about Ariel, I just want us to be better. We may be doing what we do, but I want every day I'm trying to think of how can we do it better?
Mm-hmm.
How can we deliver better results to our clients, financial results? How can we communicate with them better? How can we be less bureaucratic, more efficient? All of those things are what I'm constantly thinking about. So what I see for myself in the future is hopefully building upon the foundation where I put in the work when I was in my 20s and 30s and trying to put the floors on to the skyscraper. I'm an ambitious person, and so I'm not one of these people who feels like I'm ever done. I love that Michael Dell quote, pleased but not satisfied. It's like I'm one of these people that's not ever satisfied. I might be pleased, but I don't ever feel satiated. And
I legit so mine is satisfied but not satiated. Yeah. So it's like I'm happy with the progress that I'm making, and I'm mindful to always like to reflect back on that and celebrate self, but at the same time know that it never ends.
Right.
So yeah.
I also have this looming sense of wanting to be a good mother to Everest. And how do I do that? And be a mother that she's proud of and be a mother that is there for her. And I think that that's a tension that's it's a balancing act.
It's present. Yes.
And it's one that I feel is super, super, super important. So I always think of, like I used to in my old days, say how many days of work does it take me to get this? Now is this worth leaving Everest for? Yeah. That's how I think about it. And, how important is this to society or to what have you, or Ariel, relative to being there that day for her for whatever it is, even if it's mundane.
You also had said during that TED Talk that your mother always told you that you could be anything. Was her support the most consequential thing to ever happen to you? Is she the reason why you dream so big, the reason why you achieve so much, and the reason that you never told yourself to set limits?
I will say yes and no. Okay, so I think the environment in which you grow up in is very important. And I had a mother who loved me. And I think that's a big damn deal. So I know people don't have that.
Yes.
And so I did have someone who would do anything for me, literally, anything, and did believe that I had great potential and told me that. And I think that reinforcement was very, very, very helpful. But a lot of my pushing was in my own brain.
I'm actually really happy. Yeah.
It was me. I was born like that.
Yes.
And my mother was the kind of person, when I was up at 2 a.m, when I was in grade school doing homework, my mom would say, "Don't go to school tomorrow." And I'd look at her and say, "You've got to be kidding me."
Yeah.
Like, she would say, "Just rest."
Because you're working that hard?
Yeah. And I would say, "There's no way that is happening." I literally would say to her, "Are you trying to do reverse psychology on me?"
In grade school at 2 a.m.?
Yeah, we would work really, really hard. And my mother was more about, I think she wanted me to be more gentle with myself. And so that was something she couldn't control, she couldn't manage, she couldn't tame. And so while the support was super important and helpful, it was not the most consequential thing. It was consequential, but the most consequential thing was my own brain and my own headspace and my own drive. Yeah. I don't know why certain people are born with that and other people aren't. I am so grateful I had it. But then sometimes I think that person who doesn't have it is probably more relaxed and happier than me because they're not driving themselves crazy. Yeah. But it was in my own head.
I really, really, really appreciate your your level of transparency with that, just because the thing that I find interesting with that is I feel like, and similarly, my mom told me that I can be anything I wanted to be, and she was a major proponent, always put me in position and set me up to be successful. If that meant relocating to different school districts and this, that, and the third, always extremely supportive. Really pushed the diversity of friends and diversity of thoughts too. When I speak to people that know a little more than me, it just seems to be like I'm a bit too enthusiastic, but
that's why I think the environment is important.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's nothing worse than seeing a child whose light is not in their eyes, and you can't wish it for them. You can't hope it. You can't teach, you can't will someone to be self-confident. You just can't.
No.
And so that's why I feel like I was born with those gifts. Somehow that all came out in my DNA. I'm so grateful for it. But I also know it's, our personalities are challenging for some.
Yes.
Because that relentlessness can be very overwhelming.
And intimidating.
And it can be hard for people to live with. It really can. And so, being self-aware in that way is like, I don't know why 2 workouts or why this, that, and the other, but I do know that that's who I am, and I'm very comfortable with that. And then I have to not look down on other people who don't have that same energy or drive. Everyone, and this was a big revelation for me in my 20s. We had a coach at Ariel who said this to me, and I was literally, I'm going to say this to you, and you're going to believe that, you can't believe that I'm going to be shocked by this comment, but I was. But he looked at me and he says, everyone does not want what you want, Mellody. And I was stunned. I was like, what do you mean? They don't want to have a great life? They don't want to do this, that, and the other? They don't want to? And he said, no, some people want to go home at 5. Some people just want 2 weeks vacation. Some people want a different life. They don't want what you want. That took me a long time to process. And then when I decided and understood that everyone didn't want what I wanted, no judgment. No, none. That, no, that now, if they have similar ambitions and I can understand them, that's a really happy place for me. But you got to work with lots of different kinds of people to be successful. John Rogers used to explain that to me about the Bulls when they were world champions. He was like, there's only one Michael. And he's like, and he's at another level. And then Scotty's like a number 2, but not the same as Michael. True. And Steve Kerr shoots threes, and Dennis Rodman rebounds. Yeah. But Dennis is the best rebounder that ever was, but he's not Michael. Yeah. But you need all those people to win.
To make it work.
You need them to win. Yeah. So who's your rebounder, and who's your 3-point shooter, and who's your, number 2 who's a distant number 2? And not in a way of being judgmental. You need all of them. I see where you're coming
from, yeah.
And they have those stories about Dennis, like when Dennis was very difficult, and they took turns having to get him to practice. Yeah. But Phil Jackson made it the responsibility of the team because he said, you need him. So you can just be pissed off that he's late or this, that, and the other. But the most important thing is getting him there. Yeah. So each day it's one of you because you need him to win. People have to want it for themselves. You can't want it for them. And that's, I want our whole community, I want our society to be financially literate. I want Black people to be able to retire comfortably. I want us to pass on wealth to our kids. I want us to be in situations where we have more choices and options and more freedom. Yes. And all I can do is give the tools for that, the language, the products for it. I cannot make anyone do it. I can tell them you could save 50 cents a day. But I have to have someone say, I could.
Far too often in reference to successful people, I don't think we think about the successful relationships around them. May that be marriage, boyfriend, or just friendships. And from that viewpoint, I guess I'm curious as to how George helps Mellody be Mellody, because I think that's really, really important. And I know that Rachel plays a major part in the way I move, in the way I navigate. And I feel like far too often we're not given an opportunity or a platform to celebrate our partners in such a way.
Well, I got so lucky. I mean, it's a miracle. That's one of the things. I was doing something the other day, which is so crazy because I will be married 6 years in June. And we dated for 7 years before that. And so...
Wait. Y'all been together for 13 years?
Yeah, we dated for 7 years before that.
I didn't know that.
So we
maybe I did.
We got married when we had Everest. Or I wouldn't have gotten married, honestly. So we literally just did the wedding pictures. The book. Like they've been sitting there for 5 years. And I did them
you mean like just now?
Yes, on Monday I did them. And George is like, really? Today? I was like, it's President's Day. I got the time. We are getting this
5
done
years
today.
Later.
So we're going through these pictures. It was like literally the happiest day of my life. Literally. Like, and you can see it in every picture. there were moments of like I'm just bawling and great just emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that the person who married us was Bill Moyers, and he said at the beginning, you know, like, this is the most unlikely story. And I burst into tears. I literally burst into tears in the middle of, you know, everyone.
Yeah.
It just by that line, this is the most like, how did we find each other?
Oh, true.
And he said that when you fall in love, you find your mind's friend. And so when you ask, what does George do for me? He's my mind's friend, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing that he does is literally, he lets me be me. Yeah. There's no control. Mm-mm. There is no desire to change. Mm-hmm. There is full acceptance.
Agreed.
And it's mutual.
Yeah.
You know, and we stay on each other in our funny ways. I mean, I always joke, I alternate between head deflator and gravity boots. And he does, you know, he says that he slows me down and I speed him up. But there is no desire to try to make the person something else.
Yes.
That acceptance was my idea of love. And that allows me to be my true self. When you don't think you have to change for someone or alter your words, your deeds, your what have you, that doesn't mean you can't be better. That doesn't mean you're not looking for growth. I always push George to be super honest with me so that I can be better as a person. If I've done something in his eyes that he doesn't think is right, I want to hear it. But I do believe that truly unconditional, I accept you for who you are. I'm not even going to call it love. I'm going to call it acceptance. Is what has acceptance is what has truly allowed me to be me.
Yeah,
and that was a gift. And I hope other people get that opportunity.
Agreed. It's not coincidence.
And I hope to give that to Everest. That's one of the things that, because I think as parents, you're always
trying to tell
guiding.
Them what to do.
Yes, but I think acceptance is really important.
Agreed. Letting people flourish.
Right, and that doesn't mean you don't have values and standards.
Of course.
You know.
But still, letting people. Yes.
You know, she can't be a drug dealer, and that'd be okay with me.
True.
So.
True. As someone else that's also in an interracial relationship, when you guys first started dating, was that a hurdle for you?
No.
Was it a hurdle for anybody else?
I don't know. It wasn't my problem.
Right answer. Just curious. I think it's interesting from a standpoint of for millennials, interracial relationships just seem to be like very, very commonplace. But because I think Loving vs. Virginia was settled 2 years before you were born, I think I assume you might be viewing it from a different cultural, contextual lens. But if it's all the same as it should be, then that makes sense.
So here's what I would say. I think that the one thing that I was, I never had an idea of who I was supposed to end up with. That to me was the other gift I got. There was no package. You know how people have like, what's your type?
This idea, yeah.
I didn't have a type. Yeah. You know, it's like I dated across the spectrum of all sorts of people. And that to me was great. Yeah. I didn't have some preconceived notion of who I was, what this person, what kind of form, shape, profession, anything that they were supposed to come in. And so that gave me a lot more options in my mind. And so I think that because of that, I didn't have a color. And I like them all. You know, it's not like I've had one type of person that I dated. I dated all sorts of people.
Yes.
And this is who I ended up with. I also think that the millennial mixed race, interracial relationship structure, which is more than it was, is still, some of it seems to me to be more idea than practice.
Elaborate.
And especially I think we're in big cities. I don't think that's true everywhere. And I'd still think if that were true, we'd show up in offices that look different.
When you were growing up, who were your role models?
My role models were King and Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Malcolm X and John Lewis. And there were a whole host of people that I read about. And I felt like they were teaching me. And so I always told people, it's like, I get these letters, will you be my mentor? It's like, there are so many mentors in history. They're there for you. True. You don't need to talk to them to learn from them.
That's a really good point.
And I think that, we assume you have to have some interaction with a person to learn from them.
That's actually powerful because I actually do that a lot, especially my Netflix and chill is pretty much like historical documentaries and like Sam Cooke and Quincy Jones and Frank Sinatra and Nina Simone and Maya Angelou. And you're 100% right. I draw a lot of inspiration from that. I
Yeah,
remember,
also just life experience,
of
do's
course,
and don'ts.
of course.
You know, what path were they on that
Mhm.
they made a bad decision, or
Mhm.
what path were they on where they made a great decision? Where did they show true courage that you don't know if you would
Yes.
have? That's why I use John Lewis. I
Yes.
still,
Yes.
you know, it's like the bridge. The batons in front of them.
Yes.
You know, I
Like,
literally am
already
like, how
bloodied.
did you keep walking? Because with the backpack and the coat,
Yes.
I am like, I felt like I would turn back. Or when Martin Luther King, before they did the Selma March,
Mhm.
the one where he turned them back. He's like, this is a bit.
Oh,
This
yeah,
is not
because
the.
he knew it
had
wasn't
them
gonna go-
pray,
yes, yes.
And then he says, no, we're going back, and like that was its own form of courage. Like who says? Never mind.
Yeah, like
You
this
know,
isn't
like,
going to end well.
today
This
is
isn't
not
going
the
to end
day.
well.
When you're sort of out about civil disobedience and
Yeah.
it just sort of goes against what was expected at that point. So there's a lot of things, and that's not a sign of weakness.
No.
I was like, that showed strength,
Yes.
not weakness. He was like, I'm not going to do that to you today.
Yeah.
This is actually looks really, really bad. There's calculated risk that I'm taking here to show the world what's going down.
Mhm.
And this is not just, you know, a toss up and crazy.
Yeah. Like the goal and the intention behind it isn't to get anybody hurt, and this right here is that step that I just couldn't live with.
It's literally a bridge too far.
Yeah.
No
Yes.
pun intended, or pun intended. So yes, those lessons I think are there if we're willing to see and hear them.
Mhm.
You don't have to hear them up close to hear them.
Understand this is nuanced because success is subjective. But in your opinion, how does one become successful or self-actualize?
I think being successful is helping other people.
Yes, service.
And I think that success is being able to be your own mind's friend. So I said that Bill Moyer says that when you fall in love, you meet your mind's friend, but you got to be your own mind's friend first.
Mhm.
And so, you know, liking yourself is really important. And I think that's a form of success. I think we sometimes beat ourselves up. And so my greatest triumphs have been in times of joy and happiness around my own sense of fulfillment, not about some box I checked in terms of an accomplishment. There are other things that I think for me, success now is going to be raising a great girl. And I don't mean great in terms of great, just like a good person
Yes.
who's kind and thoughtful and hopefully looking out for other people. And I think success is a moving target.
Yes.
It never stays in
Yes,
one place.
because there is no finish line.
No, you're never there.
Yes.
You know, you got my Christmas card this year. Make sure your memories aren't bigger than your dreams.
Mhm.
So to me, dreams are a form of success. You know, you're going for something else.
Yeah.
You're just continuing to move the line.
There's this Quincy Jones quote where he says, or I think Rashida asked him how he managed to not establish a big ego. And he said, make your dreams so big that your ego kind of has no space to exist. So, like, essentially, you're just always in pursuit of your dreams, so you have nothing to be cocky about. I just was like, man, like, especially considering all he's accomplished, it makes sense.
Well, it's interesting because I do think some of the most successful people, the ones that I truly seek to emulate, they have a great deal of humility. You know, I think humility is really important. I think it's part and parcel with success. No one likes a successful asshole. No one does. They just don't.
True.
You know, they just don't. It's
True.
just,
It's not appreciated.
yeah.
There's one quote that Carmilla had shared with me that you had said to her, and I love this quote, where Carmilla was essentially afraid to leave her job, and she still hasn't, by the way, because she was afraid of what her peers might think of her. And you had said to her, no, because she was afraid to leave them behind, and you had said to her that you're not leaving them behind, they're just not coming with you. And I think on a big scale, a lot of people find themselves in similar situations where, like, they feel guilty about their opportunities and they feel guilty about their potential and their growth, and they think that they should stay in this box because they've been in this box for so long. And just the way you articulated that set me free. And granted, I don't have that problem, but the way you articulate, I was just like I'm keeping that one. Where did that one come from?
you know, a lot of things have happened to me that have put distance between me at times and others, just in terms of experiences that you just couldn't talk about because it's not
In the same
something you could
space.
explain,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't sound right. And I've always been cognizant of that. And so it sounds like you're gloating or bragging
And
or
that's not-
something. That's not, it just doesn't work at all. Or it's an experience that's so foreign that it's like hard to even
Articulate.
have any common conversation around. So I would say because of that, I always felt that, yes, I might be moving forward, but everything about this time, this place, this person is still super important to me. They're just not going with me. And I didn't leave them behind. They're not going with me. I still hold them in my heart in a very specific way. And there's no sadness about that because I can still find joy in whatever we had and what moments we had. And that's where it came from. You've got to get right about when you advance, everyone doesn't go with you. Yeah. Everyone is not happy for you. Everyone is not happy for you. You have to let go sometimes of people. And that's not in a disposable way. It's just, George always says to me, Jedi don't hold on. That's why Jedi have no attachments. They're not married. They're not
kids.
They do not hold on because those attachments bring suffering. And he says, Jedi don't hold on. And when I'm in those moments, that's what comes back to me as a quote. Jedi let go. And so sometimes that is not a sign of any ill will.
Yes.
It is just, I'm letting go. I'm letting go. And I can love and let go.
Mm-hmm. How do you differentiate growth from failure?
For me, they're the same.
Yes! Me too. Like, woo! Yeah, so I'm excited because it makes me feel like I'm definitely doing something right. But then too, I 100% agree. 100% agree. I think everybody else need to hear that too. I think sometimes the way folks perceive failure is so negative, it's so healthy, it's so heavy, it's so not conducive that yes, let them know.
I always say this very simple thing to myself in times of great pain and anguish. Mm-hmm. What is the universe teaching me? Yeah. That is just my simple question to myself. What am I supposed to be learning in this moment? Mm-hmm. And I will go over that in my head saying, there is a learning here.
Yes.
It may not be obvious to me, but it's something that's going to be very important. Or maybe it's I can see it very clearly. But if you can be curious about what the universe is teaching you,
yes,
those failures become growth edges.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every single time I felt as though I've had a major setback, there's just that pause and in what needs my attention right now? Like something needs to be sharpened. Something needs, yeah. It's all intentional.
But the interesting thing, that which is commanding your intention may not be the most important thing. Your attention, everything that is urgent is not important.
How do your circle of friends lend to your productivity? Like what is it that you learn from your peers? How do your peers inspire you? And how important is it to have the right kind of people around you?
So this is something I learned from my friend Dambisa Moyo, who who's just absolutely a genius economist and so fun. But she's one of my dearest friends. And she said one day to me, we were on vacation, and she said, Mellody, there's a theory that you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with during the week. And so I started to go through who those 5 people were. I'm like, okay, who do I spend the most, time, serious time during the week? And then what does that mean? Mm-hmm. What statement is that making? What are they pushing me to be? Yes. Who are they, etc.? It was interesting when I started to go through the list. The one thing that I could say about those 5 people is they were people who were both encouraging and empowering, but they were aspirational in lots of ways. And so obviously I spend a lot of time with my husband, and he's an inspiration. He's someone that I truly am inspired by, but happen to be married to. Yes. And not in some hero worship, some sort of way, but in sometimes just floored by the genius that is there. I was like, that's really smart. I wish I had said that. My dear friends, we are rooting for each other every day. Dorita, you know, I mean, George, I mean, those people that are in my life where I say to myself, they have my best interest at heart. Bill Bradley, like they want the best for me and I want the best for them. John Rogers said this to me when I first started working at Ariel. You want people in your life who have no agenda except for your well-being. A lot of people have an agenda. You know, who do you have in your life that has no agenda, just your well-being? I also read this story the other day about Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. It was in the Wall Street Journal this past weekend. And he talked about being a level 5 leader. That's when you're just like tip top.
Yes.
And he's like, can you be a level 5 friend and a level 5 spouse? And I was like, I literally cut out the article and Xeroxed it for all of Ariel. I did.
Mean, that's a really good point, though.
And I was like, a level 5 friend. Like, we think of level 5 leader in terms of work.
Yeah.
I was like, what's a level 5 friend? How does that show up? Am I a level? So George and I literally were talking. I was like, George, I think I'm a level 5 friend. Do you think? And we're like going, he's like, yeah, I would think so. But I was like, but tell me, am I a 4? Or do you think I'm you know, I was sitting there with, I was like, am I a level 5 spouse? You know, and he was like, we alternate back and forth. Sometimes we're 3.
Which is just marriage. That's marriage, yes.
But it was like a really great idea, a level 5 friend. Loved it.
I think far too often we try to like, we put our performance in silos, and we don't think that the amount of effort that we put in one thing we can put into all things.
Oh, well, this is
good point.
Excellence is just excellence. You either are or you aren't.
Yes.
You know, I love this. I had this conversation once with this chef, Charlie Trotter, who's no longer alive. And he said when they would hire a chef, they would give them the most mundane thing to do, like say in the interview, clean the grill, sweep the floor after the restaurant closes. And he said he would learn everything he needed to know about a person from that task, because either he said you are of service or you're not. And so he said, when you said to the person, sweep the floor, if the person looked at you and said, you're hiring me to be a pastry chef, I don't do floors. He said that person was not right for our culture. And if you had the person who said, do you have a toothbrush?
Really?
Let me get down on the floor with a toothbrush because that's my idea of clean.
Yeah.
I was like, excellence is just excellent. You don't compartmentalize excellence.
Agreed.
You are not excellent in some things and not
and terrible
excellent
at something else.
No, you may not have the same level of achievement, but at least you have the same intention to do well. I've just never met anyone who's truly great that is like
compartmentalizing.
No. Yeah. You show up that way in most things.
Agreed. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having
coming
me.
in, Mellody.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
I love you.
I know I love you too. Like,
happy to be
you changed
here.
my whole, like, yes, I can, yes, girl.